All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you all here. So today we're going to talk about the decentralized exchanges and how they compare to centralized exchanges. But before we do that, I would like to introduce our panel. Myself, Vladimir, I'm the GP at New Hong Kong VC and a studio, venture studio called Mythos Venture Partners. We have Joseph here, founder of Warp, which is a novel DEX with an on-chain order book. We have JP, founder of Thorchain, which is a Cosmos-based L1, which enables cross-chain swaps, real yield, and lowest fees in the space. And finally, we have Almir, founder of WOWMAX, which is a DEX aggregation protocol that aims to find the best exchange routing for the users, right? We don't really have like anyone representing centralized exchanges, so guys, like please don't be like too harsh on it. So I'll start with a question for JP. So the last time I checked, the DEX trading volume was at 12% of the centralized exchange trading volume, and historically it has never exceeded more than 20%. What are the reasons for that?
I would say at the moment it's actually a user experience problem. Interfaces, wallets, there needs to be an improvement of all of that, and that is coming. There's probably another 4 years of grinding ahead of us to massively improve the user experience. But there is a bit of, there's two sides. The user experience will bring the users on-chain, but then there needs to be enough on-chain liquidity. So unfortunately, a lot of that liquidity over the last 10 years has been kept in the centralized exchanges. I mean, Coinbase has over a million Bitcoin. Binance have, you can check me out at the thing of that, 400,000 or 500,000 Bitcoin. And that's, I mean, Binance has been around since 2017, so it's a relatively new exchange, and over those years, they've accumulated over 500,000 Bitcoin through an amazing user experience, an amazing brand that gets out and appeals to users. So what we need to think about is how can we bring 1 million Bitcoin back on chain again, not locked up in ledgers and cold wallets, but actually in on-chain liquidity pools. You know, wrap Bitcoin, it wasn't a, unfortunately wrap Bitcoin is navigating a bit of chaos at the moment. But there's a lot of, at least this cycle we can see with the LST and liquid staking and liquid restaking, there is now an avenue to bring 1 million Bitcoin out of cold vaults, out of the exchanges, and bring them in on-chain DeFi, at least for Bitcoin. And then once we have that liquidity on-chain and we can generate a sustainable source of yield to bring users to staking, and that's going to be like through the app chain thesis. For right now, Base make 40 million a year, so it's about how can we get that $40 million of fees from Base L2 and package it up and give it to Bitcoin stakers. That there is a giant source of yield. So user experience, more on-chain liquidity.
Okay, perfect. And I guess from the vast choice that users have, Almir, right? So there's thousands of DEXs deployed on various layer 1s, layer 2s. They have different approaches to their own design and architecture. In your opinion, what makes users choose certain DEXs over the others?
Well, yeah, it's true. What we see here at WOWMAX, we aggregate a lot of DEXs, and we see that the new DEXs emerge like every 2-3 days. Currently, there was a lot of innovation in terms of like providing concentrated liquidity, and many projects experimenting with also on-chain, off-chain kind of setup, where they match orders off-chain and they execute it on-chain. But to answer your question is basically the decentralized exchanges, they also have like also established brands. Everyone knows Uniswap. So, and other projects also like innovating a lot. When preparing for this panel, I spoke to many of our partners like Izumi, Maverick, Nile Exchange. They all like innovate a lot. But Uniswap has a very strong brand. So actually, maybe some execution efficiency is lagging there, but the users stick to Uniswap, to its brand, because they trust it. So I guess any DeFi protocol needs to establish trust. This is the first thing you need to do. Because we might have a smaller number of users, but our users are whales. Like some of our users connect their wallets to our exchange, and they have like $50 million on the wallet. And if something goes wrong, the user can lose that money like in a second, right? So it's important that you educate your users and you assure your users that your protocol is safe. So for DeFi, safety is #1 priority. And of course, deep liquidity is also an issue, but most of DEXs now deploy concentrated liquidity models, which actually could be very efficient compared to even centralized exchanges. In fact, I was doing DeFi in 2017, and that time the gas costs were very high. So I remember we were even sometimes paying a few $100s to execute one trade, especially NFT minting. Nowadays, L2s brought those costs for fraction of cents. So that's also stimulates the on-chain activity and helps DEXs to overtake CEXs. Yep.
So you touched a little bit on the liquidity and I guess the different ways to attract it. Joseph, from your point of view, so what are the key differences between the liquidity provisioning on DEXs versus centralized exchanges, and how DEXs can attract more liquidity?
Yeah, so one thing to fully understand is that what you see today in DeFi is a function of technology, right? People often say the medium is the message, but technology oftentimes shapes the medium itself. And the medium that we've been dealing with for the past 7 years is the AMM design. And obviously, we've done some tweaks with it, with concentrated liquidity. But fundamentally, you're dealing with this type of design in DeFi. And understand that real financial systems don't do this. This is not what real financial systems do. Real financial systems, contemporary ones, do an order book. And historically, it was open outcry, but everyone switched to a central limit order book. Why haven't we done that since 2017? Right? The only ones that we see are just centralized systems, some type of off-chain matching, which just amounts to being a server, right? We deal with that because we need to deal with adversarial constraints. When everyone else is an anon and a jerk, you're not dealing with the same problems that NASDAQ or the Korean Stock Exchange or even Coinbase deals with. And this type of algorithm historically has not existed. This is what we're working on at Warp. We'll be doing a release soon. It'll be all open source. And it's essentially a way to do on-chain matching where all of the data is on-chain. The matching engine itself is on-chain. We can shut down every single computer we run, and it still runs. There's no validator set. It just runs. It's run on-chain. It's executed on-chain. Even the depth chart is a view function, right? That's what you need to build. And the reason why it hasn't been built is just it requires a lot of development. It requires a lot of research. And I believe 1 year out, everyone will be using an algorithm like this, and that'll reshape DeFi. The problem with the AMM model is if you did it on the NASDAQ or whatever it was, right? If I want to put in, market make 1 Apple share, I also need to put in, $1,000 or whatever. It just doesn't make sense. And then after I'm done market making, I don't know what ratio I'm going to get. That's a little bit, I think that's why a lot of DeFi stuff, people were talking 7 years ago, okay, everything is going to move on chain. Why hasn't that transpired? We should be able to be out executing and out pricing centralized exchanges.
Yep.
I disagree with that. I think a centralized limit order book is a fool's errand to pursue. Ever since I started, there was Ether Delta, and before Ether Delta, there were attempts to put limit order books on chain. But fundamentally, limit order books are maker versus taker. For every making order, you need a taking order. Sure. Whereas the AMM design with what Uniswap with V1, V2, V3, and now V4 with hooks, it's essentially taker versus a pool. And that pool could be passive liquidity. I think concentrated liquidity was a diversion and an optimization in a specific direction, which has made liquidity providers compete against each other, when it used to be makers competing with takers, and now it's LPs competing with each other. So it's chased out a lot of the retail. That's why most of the meme coin AMMs have gone back to V2 styles, not V3 constant liquidity, because it's just too hard to manage constant liquidity when you come to volatile assets. So good luck, but I think it's a fool's errand.
So to follow up on that, fundamentally I disagree, because if you look at...
Let's go.
Yeah, let's go. Because if you look at what this automated market maker role is playing, it's ultimately a lagging function, right? Like you cannot dispute that is functionally a lagging function. I am basing this on history, 300, 400 years of history. What we've had in terms of the intense type design, which is what everyone's obsessed with right now, that historically has been called open outcry. Open outcry does not exist.
Yeah, but we in DeFi, we need to rebuild the history, destroy the legacy TradFi systems for the inefficiency, right?
No one does that anymore, and there's a reason why.
All right,
Since
guys.
1992,
Let's call
no
it a
one
break.
does it anymore.
JP, so I actually want to sort of at the higher level, like ask you a question, like the following question. So does the, I guess, decentralization itself and the transparent nature of the blockchain opens up the path to certain inefficiency or unfair advantage versus the centralized, private, more opaque systems or entities?
A proper decentralization should enable anyone to come to, well, in the case of DeFi, like a liquidity pool and interact with it. The rules of that liquidity pool should be open source and transparent, and everyone knows. Unfortunately, because of the consensus design of Ethereum for so long, that splits consensus with the application layer, a lot of the transactions have monetary value, and that monetary value is not shared with the validators, which results in maximal extractional value, MEV. So there now becomes an off-channel bribing, which is what MEV is, and you set up the conditions for sandwich attacks and back-running, front-running, and et cetera. So I think Chain, which is yet to launch, which is going to recombine liquidity with consensus, is the correct design, and it's one that we built Thorchain with back in 2018 with an incentive pendulum. So the nodes actually participate in the liquidity yields of the network itself. So I think that will stand the test of time. And that demonstrates that if you properly couple a system, security, liquidity, and consensus, you can actually design a cohesive system that works. What we've seen today, I mean, in another example with Ethereum, by not providing for staked ETH, it was also another mistake that they've made. And so they've resulted in Lido having $25 billion of ETH and a large centralizing effect through achieving economies of scale. So a bad L1 design can result in bad UX and erode the integrity of the entire system. So unfortunately, ETH has a reckoning. I've been a massive subscriber since 2015 of ETH and building on it, but ETH is being challenged by the monolithic versus modular theory, but also it's going to get challenged by Chain, which couples liquidity back with consensus. So I think the Ethereum community needed a lot of work to do to actually solve some, they've generated problems and they've solved some problems, so let's see.
Thanks. And just on a slightly different topic, but then again to align with sort of the thesis that we need to bring liquidity on chain. Almir, what is CDeFi and why has it been so popular in this market cycle?
Well, CDFI stands for Centralized and Decentralized Finance. Basically, those kind of projects, they try to get the best from centralized and decentralized worlds. But to be honest, like, you know, I know many DeFi founders here, right? But like in 99%, we all not DeFi protocols. We are CDeFi protocols because like even in our case, we kind of have like on-chain settlement protocol, but we have a massive infrastructure that doing like off-chain simulation and calculations. And then when the user wants to find the best way to swap coins, we actually make millions of calculations at the back end. And actually, most of the protocols using a lot of centralized infrastructures, that's how technology works, right? Only very simple smart contracts can be only like live on chain and then actually can be called without any off-chain preparation. But CDeFi is developing now because also the regulation pressure, you know, like for example, last week when MakerDAO announced the new token. Basically, it's called Sky instead of DAI. You know, it has a lot of abilities for the team to regulate the token, to regulate the emission, to prevent some people swapping it. So it's basically maybe a natural response of DeFi protocols to fit the current regulation landscape.
And JP, on a regulation front, so I guess you would be an expert by now. Is it coming into DeFi, and will the need to KYC users kill DEXs?
So when we first started Thorchain, we were worried about getting shut down by nation-state actors. So we built the network of high churn, anonymous validators, no delegation, didn't run any front ends, paid the front ends to run themselves, just ran this kind of like faceless protocol. About 12 months ago, large amounts of illicit flows started being swapped over Thorchain. And it wasn't long before we started getting the letters and the phone calls. And we argued at first that the protocol was as decentralized, and it's just responding to these on-chain transactions and generating outbound transactions. And the protocol itself, because of its high churn, anonymous nature, it's very difficult to regulate and enforce KYC, and it's actually will erode the protocol itself and harm 99.9% of the honest users. And that was accepted from sources. And we shifted all the burden of address checking to the interface layer. So if you do a swap on Trust Wallet and it uses Thorchain, then Trust Wallet will do the address checking. But to date, there is no oppression, no address checking, no censorship at the base layer, which is the correct way to do it. Our also thesis is Thorchain is a very large cross-chain transactional graph, essentially a very large honeypot of information. So someone coin joining Bitcoin and swapping over to ETH and going out through a centralized exchange can be very easily followed. So the regulators are actually viewing Thorchain now as this giant honeypot of cross-chain information, which anyone can query, by the way, and it's actually helping them to find and track the illicit flows through the centralized exchanges before they get cashed out. So for now, the relationship is quite productive. There is no censorship on Thorchain's base layer. The address checking happens at the interface layer and the aggregator layer. And now Thorchain is being viewed as, I mean, to get the information out of Binance, you need a subpoena them to say, this transaction came in, where did it go? You need to subpoena them. On Thorchain, you just query an API, it's all there. So it's right now being viewed favorably. And that's, I think, the correct relationship to go is say, hey, it's there. And yeah.
Super interesting. Well, I guess one more question and then we'll round it up. Joseph, just from your perspective, what tools do we still need to build to technologically advance the DEX space?
Yeah, right now, I think the DEX space is at a very, very weak position, even relative to last year. If you look at the antisocial participation within the space, like look at the complete drop-off in Solana activity. Why is that happening, right? That timed is very, very well with the MEV activity coming into Solana. Like it wasn't just pump fun, you know? If you look at the principal existential threat to this ecosystem, it is MEV. And if you think about this, everyone is talking about how do we live with MEV. It's not how do we get rid of it. And fundamentally, if you think about it, right, a lot of these people are ragging on L2s. L2s right now, the rollups, is the principal avenue of MEV protection because it creates a competitive environment between different rollups where if one sequencer starts doing MEV or letting MEV in, guess what's going to happen? Everyone is going to leave. And that doesn't completely solve MEV, but it's these types of considerations, these types of designs where we need to be thinking about. And we need to be thinking about, okay, how do we get rid of this problem as opposed to how do we help the antisocial people in this space live in it?
Thank you. And just as a final question, in 1-2 sentences, we'll start with Almir. What's your prediction for the DEX space in the next 2 years?
Well, I think DeFi protocols and DEXs will be kind of like underlying infrastructure for maybe other more like a centralized protocols because this is the only solution now which the world has for actually a really cross-chain border exchanges where no one has, you know, custody of your funds, no one can actually stop your transaction, no one can exclude your transaction. So basically, this is the nature of crypto. We did it not to to just bring the fees down. The core idea, remember, is a self-custody and the ownership of the assets. So only DEXs can provide that.
All Web2 companies, all AI companies, all centralized exchanges are going to be forced on-chain. and we will solve the user experience, and we will solve MEV, which I agree with. And the liquidity rails of the future will control the labor force of the future. The bots will be the future labor force, and the bots will be paying each other. At first, they'll use tokenized US treasuries, stablecoins. That will get censored and have to move to Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, being a censorship-resistant currency, will be the currency of the bots. And so we should all be trying to build Bitcoin liquidity.
And this is something where we definitely can end on a note where we both agree upon. I think that the future is definitely brighter. I think everyone in this crowd definitely build the tools to help us get to that space. And I think 1 year out, you'll definitely see significantly more activity, and one in which we can start to compete with not just centralized exchanges, but TradFi.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.